All right, guys. So I put together this slideshow to kind of help you out a little bit, just in the process of getting from contract to close. I wanted to make sure that everyone was um, okay, and I kind of want to do the voiceover of it. So hopefully this helps you guys out with a little bit of the process and gives you a chronology of the events and tasks to get from contract to close. All right. So follow me along, and when you guys see this, any questions, just call me. Let me know. All right, so first part, obviously get the contract signed. So once all the parties have signed the contract for sale, be sure to circulate a fully signed copy to your client. You got to make sure that they have an executed copy. Make sure that the other agent has a copy of the contract as well that's signed, because attorney review will begin once all parties have received a fully signed copy of the contract, and that attorney review period runs 3 business days. If you have the buyer, be sure to send a fully signed copy of the contract to the buyer's lender as well, so they can get started on everything they have to get started on too. Okay? Next, earnest money deposit. So if you have the buyer, coordinate with the buyer to obtain the EMD. It could be certified check or a wire, but it cannot be a personal check or cash. The buyer can drop off the escrow to whoever the escrow holder is, or they can wire it to them. You can also get the check from the buyer and deliver it to the title company, but you want to make sure you get a copy of that escrow check. I think it's better if you get the check from them, guys. It's another point of contact that you have with your client. You don't want to be asking them to go running around all over town to drop stuff off. Anything that can give you an additional point of contact with your client, I think, is absolutely beneficial, and it shows more service that you're providing. So get the escrow from them, get it to the title company, make sure you get a copy of that escrow check. If you have the seller, make sure you contact the buyer's agent and get a copy of that EMD. Or if they just send it to the title company, reach out to the title company to get a verification that they have the EMD. You want to make sure that's in. Incredibly important. Next, input all vital dates in your calendar. This is where you want to make sure you have to stay on top of the contract itself. Now, there is a checklist in Loop that'll help you with this, but whatever calendar system that you use, whatever tracking system that you use, get all the contractual dates in your calendar with reminders set ahead of time. That includes expiration of return review, when it's up, when it starts, inspection deadlines, when the home inspection, termite inspection, any inspection, when that deadline is, what the response time is for a request for repairs, mortgage commitment date, settlement date. Get all the dates in your calendar with reminders ahead of time so you are on top of everything. If you miss dates in the contract, it is not going to be good. So that is incredibly important. You have to stay on top of that. There are checklists and task lists in Loop to help with this as well. I uploaded that checklist that I sent to everyone. There's a copy of that checklist in the Facebook group in the documents, but I also took that list and put it as a task list, closing task list in Loop. So every loop that you have down towards the bottom is the task list. Excuse me. Upload that, and you'll be able to carry that around with you wherever you are by using the Loop app as well. All right. But if you use a different system, use whatever system works best for you. But whatever you do, be incredibly cognizant of all the contractual dates. You have to know those. I cannot stress how important that is, that you have all the dates in your calendar, in your tracking system, so you know when it is. Next, so if you have the buyer, you want to send the title order form to them to complete. That'll go, you can send that through Loop. This form gives the title company authorization to order title for your buyer. You also want to ask the buyer if they want a survey of the property. I think it is important for the buyer to get the survey every time they're buying a property. Should be around $400 between, you can get one between $350 and $450, but probably closer to $400 and $450. If they do want a survey, you got to check that box on the order form, and the title company will have the survey ordered and prepared for the buyer. Cost will be on the settlement statement. The reason it's incredibly important, guys, for a buyer to get a survey, because in the contract, excuse me, it states that if anything comes back that is not good with the survey, if you have your neighbor's fence that's encroaching on your buyer's property, or a shed or something like that, then it will be on the seller to remedy that prior to closing. If that doesn't happen and something comes up after closing, then it's going to be on your buyer to take care of that. And yes, I've certainly run into those situations before, and as long as you have the survey and you know about it prior to closing, then it's on the seller to take care of that. So I think it's best for them to get a survey, but you got to ask them if they want it. If you have the seller, send that same form that's in Loop to the title company, and that'll take care of the seller processing side for them. So it's two different things. If you have the buyer will fill out that form, send it to title. They will order title. If you have the seller, take that form and send it to the title company, and they would handle the seller processing. That seller processing consists of having a new deed, an affidavit of title, seller's residency, 1099, and if there is any HOA docs, they'll have that taken care of and prepared for by the seller. It's also the mortgage payoff. They'll also order the mortgage payoff for the seller too. So the seller will have to put that information on that order form, and the title company will handle that. So it's more, again, of the service that you're providing to take all that stuff off their plate. Like I said, if there's an association, title company will order the pertinent association docs required for the closing as well. But regardless of which side you have, make sure that your client completes that form in its entirety and get that over to the title company. Send title order, sale processing form, and contract for sale to the title company. So once you get that form back, regardless of which side that you're on, once you receive it completely signed and filled out, send that along with a copy of the contract for sale to the title company, whoever the processor is for you over there that's handling things for you. They need those documents in order to complete their job for you and for your client. So make sure you send that to them all one clip. Send vendor referrals to your client. If you represent the buyer, you can send them referrals for home inspector, termite inspector, radon inspector, moving company, homeowners insurance, anything else that they need. It'll certainly help. And again, the more control you have over the transaction, the easier it's going to go, the smoother it's going to go. So if they're working with people that you've worked with before and that you're comfortable working with, you know they do a good job, and your client's using them, it'll make the transaction a lot smoother and a lot more seamless. When they start going out and getting people on their own, yes, it can convolute it, it can complicate it. Not saying that's a bad thing, just saying make sure you send some referral partners to them to help you have control of that transaction. If you represent the seller, get them referral for a moving company if they're going to use them, if they got to pack up, if they're going to move, excuse me, but you want to get that to them so they can get moving companies out there, get a quote, and get that planned. Instruct the buyer to set up inspections. You do not need to wait for a Turner review to conclude in order to set up inspections. You can set up inspections while it's in a Turner review. Have the buyer set them up. If they need to be canceled, they can cancel, but they don't have to wait to set them up. Also, the buyer should be there for the inspections, so they can set them up when it's convenient for them, but they want to be there because if they're there during the inspection, they'll be able to understand a lot more about the property itself and have that conversation with the inspector. So long as the inspection dates fall within the contractual allotted times and you have enough time to put together, request a list of repairs, have the buyer schedule it for when it's a good time that the buyer can be there. Guys, also, you want to have the buyer set up the inspection and not you. Send out information of the inspectors to your buyer, but have the buyer set up the inspection themselves, because if you do it and something goes wrong, it can come back negatively on you that, hey, well, my agent set up the inspection, they picked the inspector, it wasn't me. So liability reasons, it's best if they set it up themselves. Once the inspection's confirmed, be sure to inform the listing agent of the day and the time of the inspection so that agent can inform the sellers. Yes, I think you should be there for the inspections. It'll help you understand about what repairs may be needed. So I think it is important for you to be there too. If you have the seller, send the seller the link and information to apply for the CO. Depending on the township, it may just be smoke, carbon, and fire. Maybe an additional inspection for the exterior, interior of the property. That varies from township to township. If you have the seller, this is something you should have done when you listed the property. You should know what the CO requirements are prior to going out there so that the seller can really understand what it is they'll be looking at as they move forward, okay? Right there. All right, give the township website or contact the township. If you can't find the site, contact the township to figure out what the specs are for the CO. Instruct the seller to order or apply for the CO once the contract is out of a Turner review. But get them that list ahead of time so they can plan on it that, hey, if they need to spend a couple $1,000s to get it CO ready, they're already working on that while the property is being listed, and then you don't spring something on them last minute and they're thinking they're getting X amount of dollars for the property. Now they have to spend another couple $1,000s for the CO. So let them know ahead of time. So if you represent the buyer, review all inspection reports once received. Talk with the buyer to see what repairs they would like to request. Be sure to give your input as to how to structure the request for repairs and items that are important to address, okay? And I say that because some buyers will take a look at the report and want to ask for 30 different things when A, there's some things on there that contractually the seller's not obligated to do, and B, some things are smaller items that they can handle after closing or routine maintenance things. You want to make sure the important items on that report are being addressed by the seller. So once you review that with them, you're all in agreement. You can draft the request letter. If you want, there is a sample copy of request letter in the Facebook group under docs, but be sure to send that letter to the buyer for their signature. They have got to sign off on it, guys. I know sometimes people just send emails back and forth. That is not good. You got to make sure that you're protecting yourself, protecting your client, protecting the people that are involved, protect the brokerage. So if you're just sending out a request that comes from you and not the buyer, something can come back to you after the fact, and the buyer can say, well, I asked for this and my agent didn't ask for it, they left it off. But if you send that list to the buyer and they sign off on it, that cannot happen. Make sense? Okay. But also be very cognizant of the dates and the verbiage pertaining to inspections. All the inspections, home, termite, radon, mold, etc. The request list of repairs, in addition to reports, need to be sent to the listing agent and or seller. That says it specifically in the contract. Copy of the report and or request for repairs. So get that over too. So reviewing the inspection report, request list of repairs. If you represent the seller, once you receive the inspection report and request a list of repairs, review these with the seller and consult with them on what to address and how to address the repairs. So have that conversation with them. It's best to have all repairs done by a licensed contractor in order to have work orders and paid receipts of the work that's done. It'll help eliminate any issues regarding the workmanship of the repairs. Like, I'm not saying all contractors are great, but if you have Uncle Joe that's doing some kind of repairs and can't write anything up, how are you going to sit there and prove that it's done without A, having an inspector having to come back in after the fact, or there be some kind of battle that's done? So anytime repairs are being done, then yes, it should be done by a licensed contractor. You'll need to reply in writing to the buyer's agent and where buyer specifically what repairs the seller will address and how they will be addressed. Okay, and the same thing that if you're putting together a request list for the buyer, you want to put in there that all the above mentioned repairs are to be completed by licensed New Jersey contractor, and all work orders / paid receipts will be turned over prior to settlement. All right. Be sure that you're very aware of the timeline of the contract, and a lot of time you have to reply to the requested list of repairs. There is a response time, so look at the contract. Guys, when you ask questions about things, review the contract, take a look at it, because 9.5 out of 10 of your questions will be answered in the actual contract itself. Acceptance of inspection repair terms. Regardless of which party you represent, once everyone's come to terms and agreement on the repairs, be sure you have the agreement of terms signed off on by both parties so there's no question at the end what was to be done and what was not being done regarding repairs. So once you have that agreement, make sure it's stipulated specifically in writing somewhere what's being done and what's not being done, and keep a copy of that in the loop so you can revert back to it if you need to. But get it in writing, guys. Review title report, judgment searches. So when you get the title commitment and judgment searches, be sure to review the report and searches. Review the schedules on the title commitment to make sure the information is accurate, spelling and names, purchase price, etc. If there are judgments against your client or names similar to the client, be sure to share with your client. Wow, I got to go through, my spelling sucks. Sorry, guys. Be sure to go through with your client for verification. If you have a Joe Smith, you're going to get a list of 100 some odd pages of judgments. So they're going to have to go through it and see if there's anything against them. And if not, they're going to have to state that as well. If the judgments are accurate, they'll need to work with the title company and you to help address the judgments to get them cleared if they can be cleared. If they're not against your client, that'll need to be communicated with the title company so they can remove them from title. So you have to make sure that you review it and you know what you're looking at. If you don't know what you're looking at, contact me and let me know. I'll help you out. Coordinate the appraisal. If you represent the buyer, be sure you're staying on top of the buyer's lender that the appraisal is being ordered in a timely manner. Mortgage commitment cannot be delivered without the appraisal being done and reviewed by the underwriter. Sometimes you get a mortgage commitment that one of the conditions in there is the appraisal. Well, it's a BS commitment and it's not a firm commitment because the appraisal wasn't done. When you have the appraisal done and it's clear through underwriting, then you can get a legit commitment. But stay on top of the buyer's lender, whoever it is, if it's someone that you work with, someone you haven't worked with, to make sure they are staying on top of that and getting the appraisal ordered. If you represent the seller, be on the lookout, be on the heads up or call from the appraiser to coordinate access to the property for the appraisal. If some of the time goes by and you haven't gotten that call, you need to reach out to the buyer's agent and ask them, hey, I haven't gotten a call about the appraisal yet. Can you look into it so we can get this done so we can hit the mortgage commitment date? Mortgage commitment. Be aware of the mortgage commitment date in the contract. It is an incredibly important part of the sale. That paragraph, read through it, know it, learn it like the back of your hand. If you represent the buyer, once you receive the contract, be sure to look at the mortgage commitment date and verify with the buyer's lender if they can hit that date. If that date is missed, the contract can be terminated. If the lender needs more time, make that adjustment before the contract comes out of return review. You have to look at it. Don't just get the contract, send it off, have everyone sign, review it, see that date, because sometimes the listing agent or seller will put a commitment date in there that's 2 weeks out. Well, you still got 3 to 5 days maybe of getting out of return review. Now you're down to 10 days to get a mortgage commitment? That's going to be challenging to do, especially if it's FHA or VA. So know what that date is. If you need to push it back, have that done prior to exiting a turn review. If you represent the seller, stay on top of the buyer's agent about getting the mortgage commitment to you on time. That's why having this date in your calendar is incredibly important, so you can stay on top of that agent as it's coming due to deliver the mortgage commitment to you. Homeowners insurance. If you represent the buyer, get the buyer some recommendations for homeowners insurance to ensure they have it locked in on time. They will need that. They will absolutely need that as a part of the mortgage, and the deal will be funded. It can be paid up front or it can be paid at closing as a part of the closing costs. So be sure to consult the buyer and lender to see what works for the buyer. If the buyer is getting closing costs, if they need help with closing costs, if they're not cash heavy, see if you can get that homeowners insurance paid for at settlement. Sometimes people want to take that homeowner's policy and throw it on a credit card. Well, if they throw that on a credit card and that is $1,500 and the limit for that credit card is $3,000, well, they just tap 50% of the debt in that card. Well, that can throw off their credit score. And if you have some people that are teetering and they're a point or two away, that could really screw up the deal too. So these are all things you have to be aware of. So talk to them about the homeowner's insurance, how they're going to pay for it. If they don't have cash for it, see if you can get put on the settlement statement and get paid for at closing. Check with the lender if that's cool as well. Certificate of occupancy. If you represent the seller, be sure to follow up with them regarding the CO to make sure it was ordered with plenty of time and any repairs that need to be done. If you represent the buyer, follow up with the listing agent as to the status of the certificate of occupancy to make sure it's done and complete prior to settlement. Stay on top of that. Schedule and closing. If you represent the buyer, check with them on a time preference for the settlement. You'll need to inform the title company so they can schedule the closing and send out the notice of settlement. All right. If you represent the seller, check in with the buyer's agent to see if and when settlement has been scheduled. If this time is not convenient for the seller, your seller can go into the title company ahead of time and sign their closing docs. They do not need to attend closing. Most title companies can wire the proceeds to the seller's bank. So they don't have to be a closing. We're one of the few states, I think, that seller and buyer sit down at the settlement table, but it's actually been getting away from that a lot more. I haven't been to a closing of mine on the seller with the buyer in a while. So if you need to schedule a time for the seller to go in ahead of time and sign, get and talk to the title company. They can do that as well. Utilities of the property. If you represent the buyer, they'll need to contact the utility companies to have the accounts established and the utilities put on in their name as of the day of settlement. God, my freaking grammar in this sucks, guys. Sorry. If you represent the seller, they will need to contact the utility companies to have utilities taken out of the name as of the day of settlement. It's important all utilities remain on for the final walk through the property. You don't want to have the seller call and say, close them out, cancel them, turn off the electric, turn off the gas. Everything's got to be on as of the day of settlement. If not going to be able to do the final walkthrough. So make sure they contact the utility companies to have all of that arranged. Home warranty. If there's a home warranty including the sale of the home as a part of the transaction, be sure the warranty is ordered and the invoice is provided to the title company prior to closing so it can be paid at settlement. Regardless which property you represent, be sure of the above, because if it gets missed at settlement, you as the agent, you're going to be making a payment for the warranty. Ask me how I know. It's happened before, guys, that people will miss it if it's not paid for at closing and the seller said they were going to provide it to the buyer and pay for it. If settlement's done and a week goes by and then you get a phone call from the buyer, hey, what about that home warranty? Good luck going back to the seller or the other agent and getting a $500 check for that warranty. You're going to be cutting a check for it. Trust me, it's happened before. I know from experience. So stay on top of that warranty. Sometimes it slips through the cracks because it's not major component settlement, but make sure you stay on top of it. Cash to close. If you represent the buyer, make sure their lender gets them the final dollar figure they need to bring to settlement. The cash to close number will come from the lender. These funds will need to be in certified funds and made payable to the title company. It's best if the buyer always brings a little bit extra. I always tell them $300 to $500 extra in case of any last minute incidentals. If there's an overage at settlement, title company will cut them a check for whatever the overage is at settlement. But if it's more than a few $100, they won't take a personal check. But hopefully the lender does a great job and it's nothing more than that. But make sure that the lender is getting them that number, and hopefully they're able to get them that number a day or two prior to closing, so they have time to get to the bank and get that certified check. But again, it's got to be certified check, not a personal check made payable to the title company. Final repairs and work orders. If you represent the seller, be sure you are in constant communication with them regarding the repairs. Have them send you copies of all the work orders, paid receipts, so you can get those over to the buyer's agent. They will be asked for. If you cannot provide them over, it's going to cause issues. If you represent the buyer, be sure to check with the listing agent, the seller, get all copies of the work orders, paid receipts prior to closing, and you have verification that all the work was concluded prior to settlement. You want to make sure that all the work is paid for ahead of time or it's being paid at closing. Last thing you want is a contract coming back to you asking for payment and whacking some kind of lien on the property. So make sure it's all done and make sure it's all paid for. Pre-settlement walkthrough. If you represent the seller, make sure the seller knows that the buyer will conduct a pre-settlement walkthrough on the property, most likely right before closing. This time the property needs to be in broom swept clean condition and free of all debris. That is in the contract, and it's best to advise your seller to have everything out the day prior to closing. That way you're not going to have any time for last minute issues or time to clean up. So I always advise my seller, for closing on a Friday, have everything done and out of there Thursday. Whether you sleep on an air mattress, friend's house, whatever, or you're thrown in bed on a U-Haul the day of settlement, but have everything out of there before. Because if you're running to a last minute issue and a moving company doesn't show up the day of closing, everyone's screwed. So get everything out the day before. You have to coach your clients on all of this. If you represent the buyer, schedule the pre-settlement walkthrough, maybe an hour or so prior to closing. If you do it the night before and something happens overnight that you don't find out about until after closing, you and your client are SOL. So I know of agents who have done a walkthrough the night before closing. Well, if you're going to do that due to schedule, okay, but you as the agent better go to that property prior to closing yourself to make sure everything is good and there was no pipe that burst the night before. That's happened as well, guys. There was a pipe that burst the night before. Buyer did the walkthrough. The agent went to do one more walkthrough prior to closing and found that the pipe had burst. Okay, if you didn't see that, you're in trouble. So make sure you coordinate all of that. Preliminary HUD, CD, regardless which party you represent, be sure to get a copy of the preliminary HUD or the CD for the closing. Get the ALTA. So these forms they show all the charges and credits pertaining to the transaction. Take time to review it's correct. The sale price, seller concession, the commission, yes, because that gets messed up too. The transfer tax, double check that, because if someone's a senior and the title company doesn't know, it's a discounted rate if they're a senior. Any kind of escrows that may need to be held, review that with your client prior to closing. Make sure any of the questions are answered and addressed prior to closing so they know about it prior to going to the settlement table. If changes need to be made, communicate with the title company immediately and let them know. Once changes are made, recirculate that out to your client and review it with them again. You want to make sure they are well aware of what all the fees and charges are, what their money's going to be when they get to closing. Attend the final walkthrough. If you represent the buyer, go to the final walkthrough. Go with them, yes. You can check any visible repairs that were completed by the seller for verification. Flush the toilets, turn on the water, check the appliances, make sure everything's been taken out of there, make sure it's clean. You want to test all that because if you go there and you're turning on the water, flushing toilets, and then there's leaks all the place, that way you know. If you just go in, walk around, don't test anything, you're not going to know until your client's moving into the house. If there's any issues there, call the listing agent immediately. Do not wait until you get to the closing table to fight it out. Bring it up right away, resolve the problem. You are almost at the finish line, but you got to handle any last minute issues that do come up. And yes, there are last minute issues that do come up. This is a part of the job, is having tough conversations sometimes, but the biggest thing that what we do is we solve problems and we solve challenges. So anytime there's something that you have a question about at the walkthrough, call the listing agent right away so you can resolve it. Go to closing. Shouldn't be much to do once you walk into the settlement room. Title clerk and the lender will review the closing docs for your client. Be sure to have your client bring a photo ID with them into settlement. And keep in mind this, guys, this is very important right here. Remember, settlement is the final memory of an incredibly emotional and stressful time and transaction. Make it a great memory and watch the referrals come in. If there were speed bumps during this transaction and there were some issues, but everything gets resolved and you do your job and you get to closing, and it's an absolutely fantastic memory because they got to the finish line, they signed the docs, they own the house, or they sold the house, they're going to walk out of there, they're going to walk away incredibly happy with you, with the job that you did, because you concluded and you helped them achieve their objective. If the entire transaction is going smooth, but then there's crap that happens last minute that doesn't get resolved, or it's a bad experience, you're going to have a much more challenging time getting referrals out of that. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're doing all the work that you can up to settlement. So settlement is absolutely a fantastic memory for them. And when that happens, guys, you will get referrals from it by doing some of the things we talked about: hosting housewarming parties, staying in contact with them, asking them for referrals. Make that memory a great memory. All right, guys, I hope this helps. If you have any questions when you're going through this, please reach out and let me know, and hope this will help you guys get from contract to close a little bit smoother.